I will now ask our Vice Chancellor to pronounce on the congregation.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to greet all of you and to say we are congregating in this University of South Africa for an exciting ceremony of the investiture of the new Chancellor of the University.
Thank you. You may be seated. I will now invite our Chairperson of Council, Sakis Melane, to come and make us feel at home and welcome us. Chairperson of Council.
Program Director, thank you for the introduction. I know that I'll have to follow protocol, but with the number of guests that are here today, I will only be able to mention a few. Indulge me in my capacity as the chairman of Unisa to particularly acknowledge a few people. First being the Minister of Higher Education, Dr. Blade Zimanze. Cabinet ministers present here today. Among those, I count the Minister of Science and Technology, Minister Naledi Pandor, the Minister of Human Settlement and Chancellor of the Mangosuthu University of Technology, Minister Sisulu. And allow me as well to welcome all the former cabinet ministers who are present today. I won't mention all of them, but I've seen, among others, the former Minister of Finance, Thabo Mvuyelwa, President Thabo Mbeki, Unisa's Chancellor-elect, and his wife, Mrs. Zanele Mbeki, Unisa's former Chancellor, Judge Bernard Ngwebe, and his wife, Unisa Council members present here.
I will now be calling upon our much celebrated musician, so as to ease up things in order to heat up things. And that is none other than Ringo Madimba.
Uzauti mama kubanina, utitata kubanina, teko mtungono kuna Konwen kumshani yo Bangatini na Kutizondo iyapela Mami yapela Nditinzondo Konwen kumshani yo Bangatini na Utando Sokoba Ayuba feeling now What's Babari Ari urata ulwa Mari wautwa Hakuna ungambari diva Ninga tupachiri aringa Unaniyo Kari aritoni pani Aritoni pani Oh 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 Masiba manege sana Bonise, oh, Asibange, Banye, Ojala, Ujalo, Gano, Asibange, Gezanda, Siba Bonise, oh, Mama, Nawe, Sotana. Yes, we need that message today in South Africa for our brothers and sisters from other parts of Africa, because we are one in Africa. And we believe so that we have to see Baboni I love you, my brother. I love you, my sister. You are. I am because of you. Masibamba nege santa, masibamba nege, oh yo, sibamba ni se, oh masibanya, oh masibamba nege santa, sibamba ni se, oh masibanya, Kosala, kosala, kujano Masiba, Siba, Bonise, Oh, Akakawe, Sojala, Stanana. Yes, this next song here, thank you very much, is for His Excellency, Udogotela, Thabo Mvuyelwa Mbeki. You know, we are talking about the rulers that Plato talked about when he said that he proposed actually that, you know, in his republic that all the prospective rulers should undergo rigorous testing and education for 50 years to ensure that only the smartest and the most experienced ones become the rulers. And I think you get in there just like Siyabuleleka Cool, and this one is Inkokeli.
Come malifela elilizwe. Oh, iqandulo lasembeule emasizini unyana wentombi yakwamwerane umamfukeng yo izizi Mvuyelwa ewe siyavuya ngawe enkosi jama onangu Thabo ay kambeke ekhokhela Africa vuya mnyama onangu Thabo ay kambeke ngopha manqwele Africa ay nangu Thabo To live because we have the brains in Africa. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Oh, yo, Nangu Thabo.
Without any waste of time, now that moment and that ceremony commences as I invite our Principal and Vice Chancellor, Professor Mandla Makanya, and our Chairperson of Council to ascend the stage and perform their duty.
Thank you so much, Dr. Figeni. So as the chairperson of council stands here, my duty will be to go and get our Chancellor-elect for the normal process that is now about to follow. So I'm doing just that.
University of Africa. I say Unisa University of Africa, but he is the greatest son of the soil. The curator of what? The fertilizer of peace. A former president who's current.
Ladies and gentlemen, may we give a one round of applause again to our Chancellor. Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the honor to inform you that in terms of the Higher Education Act of 1997 and the Standard Institutional Statute of 2002, the Council of the University has appointed Dr. Thabo Mvuyelwa Mbeki as the Chancellor of the University of South Africa. For the University of South Africa, its broader community, the country at large, and advocates of the Renaissance of Africa, Monday, the 27th of February, 2017, will go down in the annals of history as a momentous occasion for the university. Posterity will attest that on the day, staff, students, and friends of the university descended on the Z.K. Matthews Great Hall at the university's main campus, named after one of the reverend stalwarts of the struggle of liberation, to welcome into the Unisa community another great son of the soil, struggling giant, and a towering African intellectual. This inauguration of His Excellency Thabo Mvuyelwa Mbeki as the Chancellor of Unisa represents a turning point in history, marked by the convergence of great minds and statures, track record, intellectual provenance, and mutual commitment to the rebirth of Africa, of two undisputed African powerhouses. One an outstanding African intellectual giant and the most recognizable 21st century proponent of the African Renaissance, as well as a key figure in the formation of African Union and New Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD. The other, the largest African university, which is repositioning itself as the leading African university that is Africa-focused and Africa-centered. Hence its vision statement to be an African university shaping futures in the service of humanity. In Thabo Mbeki, Unisa could not have asked for more qualified, more committed, more dedicated, and more suitable, iconic, potent symbol in driving the African agenda. This is particularly true regarding Africa's rightful place in the knowledge development space. Indeed, there is no time, no platform more apt to demonstrate Mbeki's commitment to the African cause than his seminal speech on the occasion of the adoption of South Africa's first democratic constitution on the 8th of May 1996, in which he declared, amongst others, that I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. I close quote. Born on the 18th of June 1942, Thabo Mbeki grew up in Idujwa in the Eastern Cape. An early political activist, he joined the ANC Youth League in 1956. He was elected the Secretary General of the African Student Association in 1961. For participating in a student strike in 1959, the young Mbeki was expelled from Loveday High School and to sit for matriculation examination at St. John's High School in Umtata. 2 years later, he passed his British A-level examination as a South African Committee of Higher Education Student Trust based in Johannesburg. University followed in 1962 when the young Mbeki left South Africa for Sussex. When he majored in economics, obtaining his master's degree in 1966. In 1969, the ANC sent Mbeki to the Soviet Union to study politics and undergo military training. He joined the staff in the ANC headquarters in Lusaka, Zambia in 1971. 4 years later, he was co-opted into the National Executive Committee, which is the NEC, of the ANC in 1985. He was elected to the NEC during the ANC conference held in Kabikwe, Zambia. Mbeki also served as a political secretary to the president of the ANC, Oliver Reginald Tambo, and was also deputy secretary of the Organizational Revolutionary Council, in addition to heading the ANC's Department of Information and International Affairs. While in exile, Mbeki played a vital role in maintaining contact between the ANC and the leadership of the anti-apartheid movement inside South Africa. He then led the ANC teams in secret contacts with representatives of apartheid regime and later brought his skills to service of the negotiation which ended the apartheid rule. In 1994, Mbeki was appointed the first executive deputy president of the Republic of South Africa, serving under President Nelson Mandela. He was elected President of the Republic of South Africa in 1994 and 2004, respectively, and served until he resigned in 2008. As President of the Republic, Mbeki presided over the longest period of economic growth in South Africa since the World War, championed poverty education reduction program, and the rationalization of South African economy. He led the successful campaign for South Africa to host the 2010 FIFA Soccer World Cup. Mbeki remains a vigorous champion of the empowerment of women. Inspired by the earlier generation of the Pan-Africanists, Mbeki rekindled the vision of the African Renaissance and thus played Africa on the global agenda. In 2002, he served as the founding chairperson of the African Union together with other African heads of state and government, and he joined the establishment of NEPAD and also initiated the establishment of the India-Brazil South Africa Dialogue Forum. He contributed to and led many of Africa's initiatives to end various conflicts on the continent, including the Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, the Comoros, and Sudan. Since leaving office, He has, at the request of the African Union, led 2 panels mandated to help Sudan to consolidate peace and resolve its various challenges. He also chaired the AU-UN high-level panel on illicit financial flows from Africa. In 2010, he established the Thabo Mbeki Foundation and the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institution, both focusing on the achievement of the goals of the African Renaissance. President Mbeki is recognized throughout Africa and in the world as an influential intellectual and a policymaker and a leading mediator. He has won many awards to acknowledge his contribution to human development. Undoubtedly, such a remarkable journey that has left permanent footprints in history is one that fits in well with the strategic intent of Unisa, which is embarking on its own journey of transforming and repositioning itself as an African university. Who will be better suited than this foremost and tried and tested a proponent of African Renaissance to help Unisa navigate the trials and tribulations of the journey of reimagining and redefining itself. It is he, after all, who spoke so eloquently on this topic during his address to the late President Fidel Castro and others at the University of Havana, Cuba, on the 27th of March 2001, when he said, "We speak about the need for an African Renaissance, in part so that we ourselves and not others determine who we are, what we stand for, what our vision and hopes are, and how do we do things, what programs we adopt to make our lives worth living, who we relate to and how." I close quote. Nothing could resonate more with the vision of Unisa, and with Mbeki on Unisa's team, we can confidently proclaim nothing can stop us now. I now request the Vice Chancellor, Prof. Mandla Makanya, to perform the investiture. Let's repeat again a round of applause, please. His Excellency, Dr. Thabo Mvuyelwa Mbeki, whereas the Council of the University, in accordance with the University Act, has appointed you as the Chancellor, and whereas you have accepted, it is now my privilege to announce that you are now invested with the authority, the rights and privileges connected with the office of the Chancellor of the University of South Africa.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is now my honor to request our Chancellor to present his address.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Chairperson of Council, Honorable Blade Nzimande, Minister of Higher Education and Training, and other ministers. The Vice Chancellor did me a favor by acknowledging all the important people who are here. So I endorse that. I had noticed, Vice Chancellor, that you hadn't seen the President, who was then sitting immediately behind you. I mean the Archbishop Makova, and I don't know if I trust him behind my back. But thanks, Archbishop. I also thought I was very glad that Louis handed over these books, because it enabled us to acknowledge these other important people who are with us today. That includes our leader, Andrew Mlangeni. You know, I always try to avoid him, because, as you know, he is chairperson of the Integrity Commission of the ANC, so I don't know what he would say about my integrity. But I was also glad to see these eminent artists of ours who received these books as honorary doctors. But Chairperson of Council and members of Council, and Vice Chancellor, members of management, Chairperson of Senate and the academic staff, the President of the SRC and student staff and workers, distinguished guests, comrades, friends, ladies and gentlemen. I'm indeed privileged to take this opportunity to convey my humble appreciation of the honor extended to me by the community of the University of South Africa, led by its council, as it elected me to serve as the Chancellor of this eminent center of learning, of teaching, and of research. In this context, I'd like to salute my immediate predecessor, the Judge President Bernard Mwepe, and thank you very much, Judge, for being present here today, whom I have been honored personally to observe over a number of years as he served with rare distinction and dignity as Chancellor of Unisa. And throughout these years, I've been conscious of the fortune Unisa has had that it had him as its Chancellor, given his standing as one of our outstanding lawyers and jurists, a co-architect of our critically important post-apartheid constitutional order, and a senior member of both the South African and the African continental judiciary. I take this opportunity to pledge that I will try to do my best to honor the tradition of chancellorship that he has pioneered. Always mindful to rely on his tutorship to do the right thing correctly to serve this university and our system of higher education as a whole. And in this regard, among others, I will keep in mind the advice he gave when he said, be interested in the affairs of the university, obviously within limits as a mere titular head. I hope you all will bear that in mind, that I'm only the titular head. And he said, Unisa is a big institution and has many activities, so it is always rewarding to attend as many as possible. In this way, you will be part of the university community, understand its objectives, hopes, and even fears or concerns. And he said, when I came, I asked that the Chancellor's addresses not be too long at graduations. And I hope, he said, this remains because our graduates' minds are on the conferment of their degrees and they want to go home and groove. Unquote. On the 18th of June 2003, when I addressed the National Assembly as it considered the budget vote of the presidency, I said, and I quote, that we are pleased that we've now established a higher education presidential working group that brings together the vice chancellors of the universities and the technicons, such as they were then, and members of cabinet chaired by the president. And said the critical challenge for this working group is to contribute to the development of a shared agenda for the transformation of the system of higher education and to reposition the institutions in this sector to play a more meaningful role in the transformation of our society, unquote. And accordingly, the agenda of the working group included the very challenges which have more recently resulted in open political struggles about such relevant matters as the financing of the universities, providing for the higher intakes of students with special reference to black students from poor families and disadvantaged schools, and the expansion of the pool of university teaching staffs, bearing in mind the need to address the challenges of non-racism and non-sexism in this context, bearing in mind the curriculum development thus to Africanize teaching in our universities, improving research and the production of new knowledge in our universities, focused on the imperative to expand the intellectual cadre and knowledge which would help our country and continent more effectively to address our multidisciplinary challenges, and finally streamlining the interaction between the government and academia. And in that context, I recall that after a number of meetings of the working group, a ministerial subcommittee, which included the president, prepared and circulated a discussion document entitled The Challenges Facing Higher Education in South Africa, which was dated the 1st of June 2005. And naturally, this provoked a response from our leaders in higher education, some of which contested the views expressed by government. And writing of this report in an article published in 2007, Ms. Piyushi Kotecha, then CEO of the Southern African Regional Universities Association, said that the sense of urgency for higher education is clearly conveyed in a remarkable discussion paper released by the government in June 2005. And she said the document raises a sustained critique of the sector, accusing its leadership of being, quote, too close to the coalface, unquote, to understand the critical role that the university needs to play in society. And she said the gist of the critique offered on the universities is that we are collectively and individually underperforming, that we may well not be focusing on the right areas, and that the sector lacks self-confidence. It is, in the words of the document, she said, timid. And the document criticizes the role of academics as being too much of trainers rather than that of innovators, unquote. Well, that was 2005. I'm sure much has changed since then. But Ms. Kotecha then posed the question, are we getting a message from government that higher education needs to reconfigure itself once more in order to meet global challenges for excellence in higher education? I'm certain that many of our distinguished participants at this occasion today will recall that in the context of the potted history I've sought to convey, the then Vice Chancellor and Principal of Unisa, the esteemed Professor Dr. Nyameko Pani-Pichana, who is here fortunately with us, wrote an open letter to the then President Thabo Mbeki. And in this detailed and still relevant April 6, 2005 open letter to the President, Dr. Pichana said, among others, that you were right to raise three critical questions about higher education policy in South Africa during your presidential working group meeting the other day. You asked the questions as to whether society was clear enough in its expectations of higher education, whether we know what resources are necessary to produce such outcomes as we shall determine, and finally, whether we are providing resources sufficient to enable higher education to produce the expected outcomes. And he said all of these are critical questions, but higher education can never function in isolation from the challenges society faces. The higher education must be sustained by the goodwill of the society it seeks to serve, and that society must express confidence in its capacity to produce public good and to dream its future. And he said government has a vital role in creating that environment, but its public investment in higher education by seeking and drawing together partners from the private sector and by generating the confidence of the society. And he said, unless we do that, we should never be surprised that Africa does not feature among the 200 best universities in the world. Whatever we may make of the methodology and criteria for so determining this ranking, we cannot but recognize that we are some way from the league of world-class universities. Unquote. I was very fortunate to have found Dr. Pichana's open letter to the President, and therefore his comments which I have just quoted. And taking advantage of what he reported then, 12 years ago, I ask the questions once again today. Is our society, that is South Africa in all of its echelons, is it clear enough in its expectations of higher education? Does it know what resources are necessary to produce such outcomes as it shall determine? And is our society providing resources sufficient to enable higher education to produce the expected outcomes? I suspect that you, dear friends, believe that I have posed these important questions concerning the critical matter of higher education, in part because I have a view about how we should answer them. And I would like to confirm that indeed, if I'm right in this regard, you are correct in your belief. I do indeed have a view about what the objective and truthful response to these questions should be. But however, I'd like to plead your indulgence that you allow me the space to delay this response. And this is because, as you know, currently sitting is a Commission of Inquiry into Higher Education and Training, chaired by the Honorable Judge Jonathan Heha, who is mandated, among others, to make recommendations on the feasibility of making higher education and training fee-free in South Africa, and having regard to the Constitution of the Republic, all relevant higher and basic education legislation, and so on. I believe that it is correct that we await the report of the Commission of Inquiry, which may very well make recommendations which would address the challenges of higher education, many of which were identified by Dr. Pani-Pichana in the open letter to the President that I've cited. And I trust that you will agree with me in this regard, relating only to the issue of the timing of the response to the important questions we posed in 2005. And that said, I trust that the report of the Commission will also alert us to the imperative to engage the whole nation in a serious discussion about the larger challenge of how we should structure our public expenditures over the medium term at least. This arises from the hard reality that our democratic state continues to be faced with the task to address the very many and detailed challenges centered on what our Constitution demands with regard to correcting the injustices of the past and building the new South Africa. And each of these demands the spending of public revenues in a situation which objectively the state has finite resources, whose quantum is principally determined by the possibility of our economy to produce the new wealth from which these public revenues would be drawn. Accordingly, this means that what is spent to address one social economic challenge constitutes the resources which become unavailable to meet another or other challenges. Necessarily, therefore, the national budgeting process entails making choices, or in other words, ranking the needs which must be addressed with regard both to timing and the volume of resources to be allocated. In this context, I'd like to believe that all of us share the profound hope that the HEHA Commission will indeed succeed to provide the practical answers to the urgent matter of the sustainable funding of higher education and training. And in this regard, I was pleased that the terms of reference of the Commission referred to all relevant higher and basic education legislation, given the objective and critically important interdependence of these two stages of the educational process. And in this context, I would again like to underline that it would be important to understand that inevitably such higher expenditures on education, as the Commission might recommend, would necessarily mean the relative sacrifice of expenditure on some other social or economic need or needs relating to the matter of public expenditures. It will therefore fall on our society as a whole to accept both outcomes, consistent with the important observation made by Dr. Pani-Pichana 12 years ago, that higher education must be sustained by the goodwill of the society it seeks to serve. As all of us will understand, this brings to the fore the matter that was raised so long ago as 2005, namely, is our society clear enough in its expectations of higher education? However, I must also mention the absolute imperative our society faces of successfully combating the serious malaise of the illegal and immoral diversion of significantly large quantities of public funds into private pockets through what is clearly widespread corruption. Speaking as the Chancellor of the then University of East Africa, at 50 years ago in 1963, our late leader, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, said that, he said, "For let us be clear, the university has not been established purely for prestige purposes. It has a very definite role to play in development in this area that is East Africa. And to do this effectively, it must be in and of the community it has been established to serve." University of East Africa has to draw upon experiences and ideas from East Africa, as well as from the rest of the world. And it must direct its energies particularly towards the needs of East Africa. And he said it must work against prejudice of all kinds, searching always for that elusive thing, the truth. And yet it must be realized that we are in a hurry. We cannot just think and debate endlessly the pros and cons of any decisions. We have to act. We have to tackle our problems now, unquote. And only 2 years ago, in 2015, more than half a century after these comments by Julius Nyerere, the Dakar, Senegal, first African Higher Education Summit on revitalizing higher education for Africa said that African higher education institutions shall commit themselves to the pursuit of excellence in teaching and learning, research and scholarship, public service, and provision of solutions to the development challenges and opportunities facing African people across the continent. And for its part, our National Development Plan says that, quote, that higher education is a major driver of information and knowledge systems that contribute to economic development. And said, however, higher education is also important for good citizenship and for enriching and diversifying people's lives. And said universities are key to developing a nation, and they play 3 main functions in society. Firstly, they educate and train people with high-level skills for the employment needs of the public and private sectors. And secondly, universities are the dominant producers of new knowledge, and they critique information and find new local and global applications for existing knowledge. And that South Africa needs knowledge that equips people for a change in society and economy. And then the plan says that thirdly, given the country's apartheid history, higher education provides opportunities for social mobility. It can strengthen equity, social justice, and democracy. In today's knowledge society, higher education is increasingly important for opening up people's opportunities, unquote. I've cited these comments about the vital role of higher education in the effort to achieve Africa's development imperatives, to emphasize the point with which I agree, that everything should indeed be done in our country to ensure that this sector discharges its responsibilities in a sustainable manner. It is in this context that we must express our appreciation and understanding of the actions taken by our students in the context of their Roads Must Fall and Fees Must Fall campaigns, without approving the completely unnecessary and counterproductive violence and destruction of university property which occurred during these campaigns. And needless to say, the student movement and our society as a whole must decisively turn their backs on the forms of protests rooted in the logic of cutting off one's nose to spite one's face, as illustrated by a plethora of incidents in which we burn down clinics to demand better health care, or destroy lecture rooms because we want free education, or lay whole schools to ruin because we do not like a proposed municipal or provincial boundary. However, before I conclude, I will return to this matter of student activism in the context of our national historic tasks. I would now like to advance some general propositions. One of these is that I hold firmly, as has indeed been indicated, to the view that as Africans we have a shared responsibility to strive continuously, whatever the challenges, to achieve the renaissance of Africa. As all of us know, literally the word renaissance means rebirth. For us as citizens of Africa, of which South Africans are a component part. That Renaissance means eradicating the legacy of centuries and perhaps a millennium of a demeaning European perception of Africa and Africans, as well as the stubborn material and subjective consequences of slavery, of imperialism, of colonialism, of neocolonialism, and even the misrule that we ourselves are responsible for. And the eradication of that legacy necessarily means the corollary possibility to construct something new, so that as Africans we define ourselves according to our image of ourselves, exercising our inalienable right to self-determination. Thus would we, among others, visualize our continent as one at peace within itself and with the rest of the world, free to determine its destiny, internally empowered to allow the people to govern, to put in place programs to eradicate the scourges of poverty and underdevelopment, to define the African identity through respect for our history, our languages, our cultures, and our arts, and to show Africa as secure, Africa's place as an equal among the nations and continents. It is the achievement of all this and more which would contribute to Africa's renaissance. In the context of everything I've just said, I must express my grave concern at events which took place in this city last week in the context of what was reported as an anti-immigrant march. In this context, I want to say thanks a lot to Ringo Matlingozi for what he said now in the songs that he rendered. As South Africans, we should never forget the enormous sacrifices that were made by the sister peoples of Africa to help us achieve our liberation, and cannot now behave in a manner that treats other fellow Africans who are now resident in our country as enemies or unwelcome guests. And neither should we commit the offense of viewing or characterizing the African migrants in our country as criminals. When our communities discover or suspect criminal activity in their areas, regardless of the nationality of the alleged criminal or criminals, they must report this to the police service. And the police service itself has an absolute obligation to follow up on these community reports, thus to avoid the people taking the law into their own hands. And all of us know that our country faces many socioeconomic challenges, such as poverty and unemployment. Not even one of these problems can or will be solved by attacking the fellow Africans who have joined us as migrants. And those who organize and participate in these attacks, which must stop, should know that there is absolutely nothing revolutionary or progressive or patriotic or acceptable or of service to the people in what are in fact criminal activities. Earlier, I detailed some objectives we must pursue to achieve Africa's renaissance. I believe that it is obvious that none of these can be achieved without the determined, the sustained, and committed input of the African intelligentsia. And put simply, this means that the African universities, including Unisa, have a special responsibility to strive to occupy the front trenches in terms of the production of ideas and knowledge of cadres and activists who will drive Africa's effort to realize that renaissance. It is exactly in this context that the Unisa vision, as indeed the chairperson of council has mentioned, towards the African University in the service of humanity. It is in this context that this assumes particular importance. And I'm certain that many of us present here today will recall the important statements made by the Vice Chancellor and Principal here, Professor Mandla Makanya, during his investiture in 2011 concerning this important matter of being an African university. And he said, when it comes to Africanization, the development of globally relevant education is particularly important because the negation and discounting of one's humanity, contexts, peoples, creativity, inventions, technologies, languages, sciences, achievements, and struggles is antithetical to the development and denudes lives of their dignity and existence. And he said Africanization is about engendering education that is completely relevant within the context in which Unisa exists and in which it provides education. And this implies that while Unisa will remain committed to the diversity of knowledge systems, evolving and deriving from the global context and global communities of knowledge, Africanization will foreground its ethos, work, and praxis. And he concluded that Africanization thus constitutes one of the key ontological expressions of Unisa's culture, unquote. And I'm sure, as all of us would know, or at least guess, there has of course been much discussion among the educationists about exactly what this Africanization means, and therefore what would constitute an African university. For instance, in an instructive 2010 paper, some reflections on the Africanization of higher education curricula, Unisa's own Professor Paul Prinsloo cites Joseph Mensah as having said, among others, that, quote, that the African curriculum should in the first place arise from and contribute to African canons of knowledge and praxis, not as exclusionary and opposing Western canons, but as equally worthy and scientifically rigorous and valid. And that an African curriculum has to do with the manner in which the curriculum encourages students to apply their learning to the unique challenges they face in their local communities impacted by global challenges. How does an African curriculum allow students to use a language of possibilities, growing out of cultures of blaming and dependencies to become active participants in pedagogies of rage and hope, of critique and possibility? And for his part, an emeritus professor, Jones of the University of Sierra Leone, said in 2004 that the division between the privileged and the underprivileged in Africa has resulted in social and political instability, which is bound to continue as long as a significant section of society is left out of the full participation for and enjoyment of the benefits of development. And he said, what then are some of the challenges that our academics must face if they are to fulfill their role in the surrounding society? They are to produce men and women who, in addition to their particular skills as scientists and engineers and teachers and social workers, as priests and artists, who must be sufficiently aware and committed to eradicating the social scourge. And he said, our aim in teaching should be to produce men and women who are both critical and creative. Our students should be encouraged to be thinkers and doers rather than accumulators of facts and received knowledge. And said this must be so if they are to be instruments of change, working towards the realization of a just and consequently a stable society. I believe that the point made by Professor Jones, that the African University should encourage students to be thinkers and doers rather than accumulators of facts and received knowledge, is very important because it speaks to the challenge for our universities to educate the change agents, the producers of new knowledge which Africa needs. And as educators among us know, the very concept to be educated, as it applies to university graduates, surely means the acquisition of the vital capacity rationally to question established truths, rather than being merely accumulators of facts and received knowledge. If I may, in this regard, I'd like to cite the eminent scientists Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr, outstanding creators of new knowledge in the 20th century and winners of the Nobel Prize in the sciences. And Einstein said, the important thing is not to stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing. One cannot help but be in awe when he contemplates the mysteries of eternity, of life, of the marvelous structure of reality. It is enough if one merely tries to comprehend a little of this mystery every day and never lose a holy curiosity. And he also said a very famous statement that whoever undertakes to set himself up as judge in the field of truth and knowledge is shipwrecked by the laughter of the gods. And said, interestingly, education is what remains after one has forgotten everything he learned at school. And Niels Bohr advised that the opposite of a correct statement is a false statement. But the opposite of a profound truth may very well be another profound truth. In his 2011 Investiture address, Vice Chancellor Makanya cited comments which had been made by Professor Paul Zeleza, in which he said, I dream of a truly decolonized, democratized, and decentralized African universities that are autonomous yet accountable, committed to the pursuit of intellectual excellence yet rooted in their communities, effectively managed internally, yet working closely with all stakeholders. Universities that are Africanized in their staffing, in their values, in their pedagogy, in their epistemologies, and instructional languages, yet are capable of competing globally, contributing to the global pool of knowledge, and responding quickly and effectively to global changes and emerging local needs. Universities that attract students and faculty from across the continent and the diasporas, and that participate in extensive academic exchanges with universities in other parts of the world. Universities, therefore, that provide inclusive education, unquote. In 2010, I was privileged to address a summit meeting of African student leaders who had asked me to speak on the topic, the role of Africa's student leaders in developing the African continent. On that occasion, I referred to comments made by the Ghanaian novelist and thinker, Aikwe Arma, who had said during the same year, 2010, that to wake up from the spell of Eurocentrism and remake our society and our continent, Africans will have to retrieve their suppressed ability to conceive of our wholeness in both spatial and temporal terms. And he said we can begin doing this by re-articulating our dismembered society and remembering our suppressed history, our philosophy, culture, science, and the arts. And for this awakening, all necessary intellectual information, he said, exists here and now, though in scattered form. And it says it requires the work of groups of determined researchers to bring it together, to process it, and to make it widely available in forms accessible to all, these being the requisite preparations for Africa's intellectual awakening. And unquote. I then went on to say to the African student leaders, and I repeat this today, addressing more than the students, the regenerated African university must be the principal driver of that intellectual awakening, which awakening will empower the peoples of Africa to remake our societies and our continent. And I said, you, our student leaders, and the students you lead, must, through your actions, place yourselves among the principal architects of the new African university. And I think that's the task of our students. And I said, were you to succeed in this historic task of the renewal of the African university, with the benefits that would flow from this, all of us would rise and sound innovation that would reverberate across the oceans, proclaiming that you, our student leaders, had succeeded to lay the foundations for Africa at last to rebuild Carthage. More than 2 millennia after the Roman Empire, the Roman senator, Cato the Elder, declared that it must be destroyed. And with its destruction, that Africa must be attached to the rest of the world as a helpless appendage, unquote. Thus it is that the historic and therefore strategic task we face as a university community, as this university community, is to join hands as a council, as management, as professors, as lecturers, researchers, students, workers, together to respond to the call made by Aikwe Arma to wake up from the spell of Eurocentrism and remake our society and our continent. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I settle down, I think I'm speaking on your behalf, concerning the address of our new Chancellor, the Council of the University, the University Community at large, is constitutive of its staff and students, its alumni, and everyone else who's gathered with us here as a payment to this great home, will be saying to themselves, who presents a congratulatory address after I led Chancellor? Then you say to you, there is none other than the leader of higher education in our country. There is our Minister of Higher Education and Training, Dr. Nkosi, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Professor Makanya. Your Excellency, Mr. Chancellor, sir, our former President, Thabo Mbeki, my cabinet colleagues, Ministers Sisulu and Pando, former ministers who are here, members of Parliament, Professor Makanya, the Principal and Vice Chancellor of Unisa, and Mr. Simelane, the Chairperson of Council, and all other university officers who are here, Archbishop Makhoba, Deputy Vice Chancellors, esteemed guests and students, members of the Diplomatic Corps, and thank Mr. Chancellor for doing what you did. I also wish to say I endorse your endorsement of the acknowledgements. That was done to all who is here. Indeed, there are very many distinguished South Africans who are here. As I'm sitting there, I'm saying to myself, it's good to be a South African. It is indeed a great honor to me to congratulate Dr. Thabo Mbeki on this occasion of his inauguration as the Chancellor of the University of South Africa. In accordance with the Statute of the University of South Africa, the Chancellor is elected and appointed from nominations by members of council, staff, students, and the convocation to this position. I wish to thank former President Thabo Mbeki, despite his many commitments that he has, for accepting this responsibility of being Chancellor of our largest university, not only in South Africa, but in the continent. Through his nomination, Unisa has recognized former President Mbeki's vast contributions to our country and its people, most notably in the area of leadership, intellectual discourse, philosophy, and the very identity of the society he continues to serve. Former President Thabo Mbeki has distinguished himself in many respects, and I want to say that despite whatever differences we might have had, since I've known you from 1986 in Sweden and Poland, I want to say without fear of competition that you are one of the greatest intellectuals. Also, one thing I must confess that I admire in you is your stamina. I won't take all the time, I promise to move very quickly, but I can't resist this one. In 1986, one of the outstanding clauses, few outstanding clauses in the Constitutional negotiation, was the one with the right to strike or the right to lock up by employers. There were big debates, and even inside the alliance itself. So President Mbeki was asked, as deputy president then, to chair this alliance meeting, which started at about 8 in the evening and finished somewhere around 4 or 5 a.m. I don't know how many times I dozed off. But I never dozed off even once. And we carried through until we actually reached the common understanding, at least as the alliance, to take the position through the constitutional negotiation. But I wish to warn you, Dr. Mbeki, that stamina which I admire, Sister, I would like that it be reduced now that he is over 70 years. What I want to say also about Unisa is that Unisa is actually the founder of our university system. It was founded in 1873. Basically, every other university here started as a college under Unisa. And in 1946, it exclusively focused from 1946 on distance education. It's making an enormous contribution to the African continent. We, as South Africa, by the way, we rank amongst the top 10 in the world in terms of proportion of foreign students in our university system. We have just over 7,000 foreign students, of which more than 90%, around 90%, are from the rest of the continent. And one starting figure is that there are leading from the front in terms of transforming this institution. Led in the main by change management unit in the office is something that is outstanding that we would like other universities to follow through. Because what it is doing is to contribute also to the debates around many current issues about higher education, including transformation of curriculum, changes in institutional cultures, and so on. So it is very important that indeed units are seen from the front, because you are 35% of our universities in terms of the number of students that are here. We also appreciate the number of very relevant institutes that Unisa has established. Apart from the research chair in the development education, we also host the Institute for African American Studies, Institute for Open and Distance Learning, the Thabo Mvuyelwa Mbeki Leadership Institute, the anti-apartheid Institute for Applied Social Policy Research, the Institute for Global Dialogue, Institute for Dispute Resolution, the WIPOL Brigadier Chair in Electoral Democracy, and the Institute of Social and Health Sciences. That is a very important contribution. And here also I'm sure that as you were proudly telling us about your increase in research output, also has what to do with this kind of institute that you have established. I also want to use this opportunity to thank Unisa and Mr. Chancellor for also leading in a very important area in forging relations between itself and some of our technical colleges, our technical and vocational education and training colleges. Unisa now has got some of its programs certificate being offered through 4 colleges. That's laying a very important foundation of articulation between colleges and universities. So the students who come out of those programs, if they wish to continue with the university, what they require at the college will automatically be recognized by Unisa so that they get credit out of it. Something also that is very important. Something that is also very important in actually increasing the prestige of our technical colleges, because we have a highly skilled system where we have more university students than technical college students. We are nowhere like no other country in the world. Ideally, we should have 40 technical college students per 1 university student. So we appreciate that. Now, let me close by saying, Mr. Chancellor, yes, I have been emphasizing that you are a titular head. Largely true. But someone like yourself, we are expecting a little bit more than that. A little bit more than that. Also to guide, to go to this institution intellectual as to actually where it goes. So on behalf of government and my Department of Higher Education and Training, indeed we are very proud today that you have been inaugurated as the Chancellor of our largest university in the country.
Thank you so much, Minister. Now, as we progress with our program, I guess the chairman of our council is really told in order to close formally this ceremony. Thank you, Mr. Pratt.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I won't be on I won't be more than 5 minutes. And I will be focusing on the soft part. So the hard part is finished. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you will agree with me that that this morning has been a real celebration of all good things that you have. I'm not sure how many of you were counting, but I counted about 54 awards that we handed out this morning, and even the university of the size of Unisa, that is a considerable achievement. I want to congratulate you on behalf of the Council, and I hope that this is the start of even greater things for all of you, because I realize that your success will surely be Unisa's success. To all the academics who crossed the stage this morning, I know that your accomplishment will manifest itself in many ways, but importantly, I hope to see it in the enhancement of the Unisa's academic project. It is, however, also important to acknowledge that the many other Unisa staff, academics, professionals, and administrative staff who may not have walked the stage today, but who will also use their time and expertise to achieve Unisa's goals of quality and success. And to all of you, I want to recognize your efforts, and I'm convinced that as long as we share common vision and a mutual goals of quality, service delivery, and excellent scholarship, Unisa will succeed in fulfilling its promise. Ladies and gentlemen, we will give them all a round of applause. To the second part of our today's event, of the inauguration of the Chancellor, I say, Chancellor, this is a very important day for us, and on behalf of Chancellor of the University of South Africa, extended management, the staff, and students of Unisa, I want to welcome you to the University of South Africa. I believe that today all Unisans put aside their differences and greet you with a united voice. Unisa is singularly proud to call you its Chancellor, and we look forward to your strategic leadership and direction. To Professor Makanya and his team, I want to wish you a success in 2017. I know that there are several challenges that we need to overcome, but equally I know that with the collective experience and expertise of your extended management team, issues such as qualified audits, increased access and good rates, hated research outputs, quality student support, optimal service delivery, good ICT innovation, creativity, financial sustainability, I can name a few. And progressive planning, all have been prioritized under your leadership. I am afraid that there will be many successes during the course of this year, given the fact that we will be very fortunate to start this new year with the presence and participation of our Minister of Higher Education in the academic opening and the inauguration of our Chancellor. Minister, we are very cognizant of the demands of your schedule. We sincerely appreciate the time that you have taken to acknowledge the importance of Unisa, its role and its position in the post-war system, generally in the higher education sector. I want to assure you that this university and its leadership fully support you and will always be behind you in every direction that you take in shaping the higher education sector. We again appreciate your presence in this institution today. May we give you a round of applause. I want to also thank all the academic ministers, the former academic ministers, the vice chancellors, and the chancellors of various universities who have raised our questions, who have raised our functions this morning. We understand that it's time of the day is crucial for universities, and your presence today is truly valued. My favorite wish for all of us this year is that the academic year is allowed to progress uninhibited. Important paths have been planted in the sand to address the constraints I and many people, including the news channel attendants, we really appreciate your support. And finally, I know that we will be, they will be telling us where we will have our refreshments, but that will only happen after the Chancellor, after our new Chancellor performed his first minister today. But before I do that, I think I will allow Proponent to say that I think colleagues and wish you well.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chancellor of Council. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the time when I'll be inviting all of you to stand for the singing of the national anthem. I hope that we will all, if they not remember the anthem and the program that because we have said every person who is here to sing with us. It is the pride of our nation. Shall we sing the national anthem? It is an academic university. Because we are here, we cannot afford to let you go without getting something to eat, to manage, and something to drink. That's what the African woman has. Thank you so much. And I would also like to request that the academic procession be called, that let us allow our dignitaries and the members of our Chancellor's family, together with the honorary degree awardees, as well as those who received the awards today, to follow us because it will be necessary to take the photographs with our Chancellor. And then we will be requesting that once you give them the space, that everyone else shall then follow. Now, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have move for me to request to dissolve the congregation.
By virtue of the power vested in me, I dissolve this congregation